We're getting to the end of the year, so I'm going to use up some of these scrap pieces, and I'm going to start by crafting a town well. And I just use one of my bottles, paint bottles, to create the circle. That's the outside of the well. And for the inside of the well, I started with the lid for the bottle because it's a little bit smaller, but it wasn't small enough. So I used a lid from some of my Vallejo paints to draw out the inner circle. That's easy enough. The next step is to cut out the well and cut out all of the excess. And I start out with my Olfa knife. Take it off around the edges there, and I'm just trimming it back into the circle shape. And then to get a little bit more detailed, I go ahead and use my X-Acto knife to round it out. For the inside, I just use the X-Acto knife again, crosshatch the interior, and then I'll use a clay tool to pop the rest of that interior out, so I make a little hole for where the water is. And there we go. It was a little taller than what I wanted for the set piece, so I cut it down just a little bit. And I'm using you can't really tell, but I'm using the dots in the grid there on the mat to gauge its width or height, I guess, in this particular case. And when you set it on its side, you can go up to half of one of those grids, and that'll give you a 1/2 inch, which is what I went with for this particular piece. The next step is just to get little bits and pieces of the foam and put it around the outside and just glue them on. And those are little stones on the outside of the well. And then for the top, for the capstones, I started out with rectangles, but then decided wedge shapes looked better. That way it would look like a circle once you went all the way around the top. And then just cut them out and place them up there with a little bit of white glue. Easy peasy. Japanesey. Now, when I'm putting these around, I'm not paying too close of attention to the interior. It's the exterior I want to make sure I've lined up to where it looks close. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I want it to be somewhat close on the outside. I can trim the inside with an X-Acto knife after the glue's dried. Once I got those in place, I went ahead and used a wadded up piece of aluminum foil and rolled it really gently on these pieces because they're thin, to give them a little bit of a stone texture. I start with the capstones, and then I turn it over on its side and do the side blocks as well. See, here's where I'm trimming up those capstones at the top of the well. Getting rid of any excess that I'm not going to use. The next step is I had a bunch of this spackling compound. As you know, I'm working on the studio because it's a mess right now. I'm rebuilding a whole section, and I'm doing it as I have time. I don't have a whole lot of time to work on these projects, given I've got that big project with a house going. It sort of takes precedent right now. So I went ahead and used a little bit of this spackling compound just as an experiment to see how it worked. If it would stick to the foam, how well it would stick to the foam, if I could paint it. Well, I know I can paint it, but just to see how the craft paint holds up and how it looks after the fact. Once I get all of that into place, the next step is to Mod Podge it. This is going to give me my base coat and protection. It's typical for me to do this with foam pieces. There we go. Once that's dried, I go ahead, and it doesn't take long for it to dry. I'll go ahead and give a base coat of dark gray. and then a dry brushing of tan, and followed by a dry brushing of white. Vanilla, I think, is the color. Instead of a pure white, I think I went with a vanilla just because that's what I had on hand. Here's the tan dry brushing. And there's the white. And it really pops after you, probably a little bit too much, but the next step after this is to do a black wash. Actually, before the black wash, I forgot I did this. That's right. I didn't think that the mortar held together all that well. So I went ahead and painted over the mortar lines with some of the white. So it makes the mortar stand out from the stone. Get it back to the center of the camera there. And then I just finish up by doing the mortar lines of the capstones themselves. There you go. Alright, with that all wrapped up, next step is our black wash. I thought I put this on a little thick, but after it dried, it looked pretty good. Now it's time to build a base, and for that I'm going to use some chipboard and then a place for the bucket to sit and descend into the well. I'll do a couple little posts and stuff, and I'll use some string for the rope. So first thing I do here is I take this little round dowel. You pick these up at Michael's or Walmart. And they're little 1/4-inch dowels. And I made them a little tall because I may come back and put a top on this later, a little roof. But for now, I'm just going to do a little 3-post holder for the bucket. Use a little bit of hot glue to put it together, and then all that's left to do is paint it. And to paint it, I'm going to use this dark brown. I think it's a burnt umber. And give it a base coat. And now I'm gonna, while that's drying, I'm going to use a little bit of white glue, lay down a coat, paint it on, and then add some flocking to it. Is that flocking or frocking? I frocking don't know. I'll go look it up later. I think it's flocking. I'm probably wrong. Anyway, back to it. Dry brushing now. Here we go with a little bit of the dry brushing. I think I used a tan. And now I'll put a little bit of glue on there. And why I took it off camera, I don't know. I'm doing this in an awful rush. I put the glue on there to hold the rope into place, and then I just wrapped the rope around it and then dropped it into the well because the bucket's already in the bottom. That way I don't have to make a bucket, and it still looks really good. And that's pretty much it. And this is a nice little piece. You can throw this well down in a town, and that's pretty common, a town or a village. But you can also throw it out in the middle of a forest, and that might be an indication of a nearby settlement of goblins or kobolds. Or maybe it's an abandoned well, and down in the bottom of it, you got some treasure. There's just a lot of different uses for a well. And with that, I think we're done. I'm trying to pump out the rest of these videos for the rest of this year. I've got another, let me think. I think I have another 4 or 5 to publish by the end of this year, so I got to get cranking on it. Anyway, I'm off to work on another video. Hope you liked this one. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Leave comments down below, and until next week, have fun and keep crafting.